So thank you, and to virtual people, thank you guys for coming. We are going to definitely be open to any questions at any point. If you have questions in the middle, feel free to raise your hand or just yell it out. We'll answer, and then we'll also answer questions at the end. But wanted to introduce everybody. So I'm Jen Marsh, the team lead of the Marsh team at Sotheby's. And then I'll have my team introduce themselves and who they are. Yeah, so people can see you on the virtual.
On the virtual.
On the virtual.
On the virtual. On the YouTube and on the internet.
Yes, I think go for it.
We have to stand together.
You know. Beth, you want to start?
Yep, so hi, I'm Beth Schindler. I am just moved here to Arizona from Tennessee. I've been in the business since '07, and I'm excited to be here.
I'm Emily. I'm the marketing client success.
Yeah.
Is that what you're
Yeah. Yes,
client
she's the jack of all
success
trades.
We were working on the name there. And I've been on the team for almost a year now. Excited to be here as well.
I'm Lisa Gibbs, born and raised in Arizona, and fun fact, I'm Jen's mom. And then
She's responsible.
I do sales, and then I'm also the team's transaction coordinator.
Hi, I'm Abby Stoughton. I've been on the team, well, it's really Jen is to blame for why I'm here. But I am also, other than a licensed real estate agent, I'm also Jen's and the rest of the team's listing manager. Yep. So.
All of us are available to help you. We work very cohesively as a team, and then everybody else that we have here, you guys can sit. Sorry, thank you. Are also people who I love and trust so much. They're who I personally use when I buy my own rental properties, my own homes, everything. So, Jen, if you want to come up here and introduce yourself.
Yes. Hi, everybody. I'm Jen Weller from Fidelity Title, so you're in our corporate office, so thank you all for coming. I've been with Fidelity 18 and a half years, so just a minute. I'm Arizona native also, originally from Tucson. Had to get out of Tucson, so went to NAU and then ended up here, and I love it here, and I don't think I'm ever leaving. Title insurance, most people don't really pay attention to us, so we're not the important ones here. But we're the ones that handle your transaction. We hold all the money. We're between the two parties, we're the buyer and the seller. Work closely with the lender, and we insure it to make sure that there's no defects on title where someone comes up later and says, no, I actually own the property, or that there's a lien against it that they're saving you money for. Make sure everything's clean and insured. And we're a Fortune 250 company, so that's rare. Not many title companies are. And if there's ever a claim, we have $1.2 billion in reserves. No other title company can say that. So there's a lot of new title companies come in. A lot have gone. We're not going anywhere. So we just know we're going to be around. So thank you.
Amazing service too, that you can always get somebody on the phone. I've never had an issue with earnest money disputes in terms of like having it go a true fair way with where it should go on legal standpoint, and just the service that you get here. I've used other title companies just by force through other transactions, and does not hold a candle to you guys. So,
and we really try to be safe with everything because a lot of people are worried about fraud protection. And one new exciting thing that's happening, thanks to our commissioner, because especially land has had more fraud situations happening. Starting January 1st, you have to, you can't just go down to the recorder's office and record something. You're going to have to give a thumbprint along with ID. So we're all excited about that.
So thank you.
Thanks.
Jeff, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure.
And I'll have you get into your stuff after we introduce Ali.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Jeff Smith, Tiger Home Loans. I'm own a little mortgage brokerage, so residential lending, and been in the business for a little over 17 years. And so today we'll talk about what the financing options are when you're acquiring an investment property, and how all of that works as it relates to financing. And we've known each other for a long time now.
6 years.
5-6 years. Yeah, we've been working together. So an amazing group. Love working with you guys, and love working with all of your clients. So yeah.
And again, Jeff, I've used for multiple transactions. Actually, we did 3 all at one time, and that was madness. But he
It's fun madness.
kind of just hit a point where I was just signing stuff. But he pulled it off. I mean, we had 3 closings literally like all within, I think, 5 days of each other. Like, it was just kind of back to back, and he made it all happen, and it was crazy. But he kept it organized, and definitely don't know that another lender would have been able to pull that off, or mortgage broker, excuse me, would have been able to pull that off. So
I appreciate that.
yeah,
Thank you.
great service again. You can always get him on the phone anytime. Jesse actually worked with him not too long ago, and I think you can vouch for his service as well. So
It was a non-standard deal, I would say.
yeah, definitely. So thank you.
Sure.
Ali, if you want to introduce yourself, we'll jump into everything. I guess I'm kind of feeling on the slides.
Hi everybody, Ali Jennings. So I'm AJF Inspection. So we do home, commercial, and sewer line inspection company. It's actually my family business. So my parents started it in '96. So we've been around for 27 years. And we have a large team, and just super proud of what we built over the years. And my brother and I are actually now kind of helping at the forefront to lead our company, and my parents are able to take a little bit of a step back, and so it's really cool to be able to have that generation. So we're excited to talk today about home inspections. They're not that sexy, but they're important. And thank you for including us, and Jen and the team, we've been working together for a long time.
Yeah, so
You're awesome.
you too. So
Thank you.
we've been working together for about 5 or 6 years
Uh,
also.
yeah,
At
I mean-
least, and again, I use AJF on all of my personal and rentals, and I only inspection company I recommend, honestly. So they are amazing because they are very thorough, but they're not alarmist. So they're not going to call out random stuff just to say that we have items on our inspection report. They call out legitimate items, but they don't miss things. I mean, they are.
That's the goal, right?
That's the goal.
Or
They're,
if you're-
they're very
and
thorough.
customer service if you're human.
Yeah,
how do you handle that?
right. So
Thank you.
everybody, and then Jeff, I will pass it. This is everything we're going to be covering, but we don't need to waste time in that. So I'll start with Jeff. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. So thinking in terms of financing an investment property, you've got basically 2 families of loans that you can finance an investment property purchase on. Conventional mortgages, conventional conforming mortgages, which are loans that go to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. And then there's some jumbo loan programs where you could finance a mortgage as well with a jumbo loan. And then the difference with those is really just the size. So a conventional conforming loan this year goes up to a financed amount of $726,200. Anything that you borrow above and beyond that would have to be a jumbo loan. And so the differences there being, especially on an investment property, you're going to pay a higher rate on a jumbo loan than you would on a conforming loan. So there's some advantages there to get into that conforming loan limit if you can. There's 3 forms of occupancy when you're financing a mortgage. There's a primary residence, which is the home that you occupy as your main residence. That's where you get your mail. That's like if we looked at your bank statements, that would be the address that's on your bank statements, your pay stubs, that kind of stuff. Second homes is think of it as like a vacation home. So that's a property that is outside of the general market area of where you live. But it's a property that you spend at least a few weeks a year residing in. So vacation home is usually the easiest way to think about it. I wouldn't live in Chandler and then have a second home in Gilbert. But I could live in Chandler and have a second home in Sholo or wherever it is. And then everything else falls under investment property. So sometimes people are getting you can call it either a non-owner occupied loan or an investment property loan, even if they're not intending to rent it. Like if I live in Chandler and I want to buy a home for my parents in Gilbert, because that's within the market area of where I live, even if I'm not charging them rent, it would fall under an investment property. And then same with a true rental property. So any mortgage transaction, the occupancy is going to fall into one of those 3 categories. So we're going to talk about investment property transactions. Minimum down payment is 15% on a conforming loan. The rate's not going to be good if you put 15% down. And even at 20% down, you're paying more in fees. So really the sweet spot, if you can get to a 25% down payment, is going to be the best in terms of the financing terms that you're gonna get, the rate and the closing costs. But technically the minimum down payment you can do is 15%. In this market, and it depends how much demand there is on the buyer side and how competitive it is when you're negotiating an offer. But when we're in a market where rates have risen, it's always great if you can get the seller to contribute some money towards your closing costs, and then you can use that money to buy down the interest rate. So that's what we would call seller concessions. So when you're financing an investment property mortgage, the most you can get from the seller is 2% of the purchase price. So it gets capped there. Primary residence transactions, you can get up to 6% from the seller. But that can be a great way, like if you're putting 25% down, you're getting 1 or 2% from the seller, and you can buy down the rate, you can get decent terms on an investment property mortgage. Down payment, so where are we coming up with the money for the down payment? Acceptable sources of down payment money is anything that you have in savings, so stocks, checking, savings, retirement accounts, mutual funds, anything like that. You could borrow money as long as it's a secured loan, so like a home equity line of credit against your primary residence, or a loan against a car, or if you had some kind of any other kind of asset that you secured a loan against, that would be acceptable for financing or for covering the down payment and closing costs on an investment property. You cannot get a gift from anyone to go toward the down payment and closing costs on an investment property. So that sometimes can trip people up, because gifts are fairly common on like a primary residence transaction, or on a second home you can even see it. Lenders will not allow a gift when it's an investment property. So anytime we're underwriting a mortgage, we're looking at the most recent 2 months of bank statements to underwrite that loan. So a workaround for that, if your only option was to get money from someone else to cover the down payment, you could get that money from them in advance and let it sit in your accounts for at least a couple of months, and then it's not showing as a deposit on your bank statements, and it doesn't have to be addressed with the lender. When you get the money within the most recent 60 days of when you're applying, then it's going to show as a deposit on your bank statements. So that that's one way that we could work around that. And so then jumbo loans I mentioned earlier, that'd be if you were needing to finance a larger amount than $726,200. That conforming loan limit gets adjusted every year, so we would expect that limit to be a little bit higher going into next year, but that's what it is so far this year. Any questions on that first slide? Okay, so it's kind of just some of the basics on what the loan products are. So when the transaction is an investment property, when you're specifically buying an investment property, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac will allow you to have 10 financed properties altogether. So that property, you could have 9, and then that could be your 10th property. But if you already had 10 financed properties, then you could not finance another one with a conventional mortgage. If any of the properties you owned were paid off and free and clear, then that does not count toward that total. So it's 10 financed properties is the limit that you run into. Using your primary residence to cover down payment and closing costs and acquire a second property, I think is a great strategy in this market, especially for folks who've been in the market for 6, 7, 8 years. The average person's sitting on a lot of equity in their home right now. So what you could do is take out like a home equity line of credit or cash out refinance to pull equity out of your primary residence, and then use that to cover the down payment and closing costs purchasing an investment property. So if you do that, we're going to take the payment for the home equity line of credit plus the payment for the new mortgage as part of the way that we qualify you for the transaction. But that's a way to then acquire another property without having to dip into your liquid savings to be able to cover the down payment and closing costs. And so I like to go through just this kind of like basic return on investment calculation when it comes to purchasing real estate, because for me, I've been in the mortgage business for almost 18 years. It's the only career I've had. So prior to that, I was, in college washing dishes at Red Robin. So I've been investing for 18 years, and by far and away the best investment that I've ever made is real estate. And the main reason for that is your ability to be able to leverage financing. So if we take this as an example, a $500,000 home purchase, you put 25% down, so you're investing $125,000. Let's say that home is going up at a rate of 5% year over year. You're gaining $25,000 a year in equity. If your rent on that property is $2,000 a month, you're bringing in $24,000 a year in rental income. So if we take the $49,000 in return that you're earning divided by the $125,000 that you invested, your return on investment is 39% ROI. So that's just a basic calculation. I know I'm leaving out, expenses and interest and some of those things, but there's also tax deductions that I'm not adding in there and that kind of thing. So that just gives you an idea of when you leverage a loan to acquire an asset, your return on that money is going to be significantly higher than if you're not leveraging a loan. Because if we compare this to putting $125,000 into the stock market, you're earning 5% on a $500,000 home, but you've invested $125,000. If you put $125,000 in the stock market, say that's earning 5%, you're earning 5% on $125,000. So you're 5xing your investment by leveraging a mortgage. So that's where real estate's super powerful. So we talked about the 10 financed properties limit. If you buy a property as a primary residence, there's no limit to the number of properties you can have financed when the subject property is a primary residence. So I could have 10 financed properties right now, go purchase a new primary residence as my 11th property, and there's no restriction on the number of financed properties that I have. So one good way to acquire additional investment properties over a period of time is buying a new primary residence. So when you buy a primary residence, you have to live in the property for at least 12 months. You sign an owner occupancy statement when you close on a primary residence stating that that's, to the best of your knowledge, going to be your primary residence for the next 12 months. Outside of that, you're not bound to live in that property as your primary residence. So when you're purchasing as a primary, you get a lower interest rate, lower closing costs, and then the minimum down payment is lower as well. So you could put as little as 5% down on a conventional loan, whereas an investment property, you have to put 15% down. So if you bought a primary residence, lived in it for at least 12 months, then you could move out of that residence and buy another primary residence, putting 5% down, and now rent your former residence. And then you could continually move forward acquiring an additional property. As long as it was at least 12 months that you were in each property, then you're staying within the bounds of what the guidelines are. The best part of that is that you're getting better interest rates. And so for anybody who owns a home right now, they're probably sitting on a 3% interest rate, right? So we don't want to let go of that rate because that's a super low rate. But if you want to acquire more real estate, you can do it at a lower rate by buying that next property as a primary residence instead of just outright buying it as an investment property. So that's another way to then leverage lower rates and a lower down payment. When you buy a new property as a primary residence, if you're renting your departing residence, if you get it rented before closing on the new primary, we can use that rental income toward the qualification of the loan. So we will use 75% of the rental income on your departing home as qualifying income toward the mortgage application. So the lenders use 75% to account for vacancy and expenses. So the only thing you have to have is an executed lease agreement prior to closing. If you rent it to a family member, it has to be an executed lease agreement plus a security deposit prior to closing. So that, I think a lot of times people wonder if they have enough income to qualify to acquire additional properties. But if you've got it rented, that rental income is offsetting your mortgage expense. So you're really not having to qualify for 2 full mortgage payments. And then same thing where if you're buying the property as an investment property, when the lender does an appraisal on that home, there's an additional schedule that the appraiser will put together called a rent schedule. And so they're just coming up with an average market rent for that type of home in that area. And then that's a schedule within the appraisal report. So whatever the appraiser says is the average market rent, the lender will use 75% of that number as well as qualifying income when the subject property is an investment property. So especially with the rental to mortgage ratios right now, rents are so high, a lot of times 75% of the lease income, the projected lease income, is close to covering a new mortgage payment on an investment property. So if you're buying a $500,000 home, you might only be qualifying for a $500 or $700 a month payment because the remainder is being covered by that projected rental income. So the difference there when it's an investment property is you don't actually have to have it rented yet. It's based on future rental income. Any questions on that? Yes, Jesse.
Tax implications before there's a tax benefit.
Yes.
Then is there also the tax hit back on this slide? Before you go here, on the current slide, the full rent in your example at $2,000 per month, does that get counted as income, or is that not counted for taxable income?
Now, are you asking in terms of like when you're filing your taxes, how the IRS will look at that?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes, it does count as income.
Yeah.
So that is income to you coming in. So it is taxed as income. But I'll show you on the next slide, you can deduct a lot of expenses off of that income. So it's a great source of income to bring in because it's not like getting a W-2 from a company where you basically have like no write-offs on it. So you can deduct some expenses off of it. Yeah. So we'll talk about that next. And that's one of the reasons why I think investment properties are so powerful is because you now have someone else writing you a check every month. Whereas like if you've got money in the stock market, you're just looking at like what the valuation is of the companies that you hold. When you have real estate, you got like a tangible asset and you have someone who's physically writing you a check every single month. And I think that's a very powerful thing to have in terms of income coming in. So now you're all of a sudden bringing in dollars without trading your time to get those dollars, because once you've acquired an investment property, you get it rented. As long as the renter is making their payments, you've got money coming in. Whereas if you're working at your job, you're only getting paid if you're putting in hours at your job. So you're not trading time for money when you've got an investment property, and you have someone who's physically writing you a check every single month. And I think that's a very powerful thing to have in terms of income coming in. So now you're all of a sudden bringing in dollars without trading your time to get those dollars, because once you've acquired an investment property, you get it rented. As long as the renter is making their payments, you've got money coming in. Whereas if you're working at your job, you're only getting paid if you're putting in hours at your job. So you're not trading time for money when you've got an investment property. So let's go to the next. So this is going to be hard to see, but this is Schedule E of the 2022 personal tax return. So when you own an investment property, you're going to have Schedule E on your tax return. So Schedule E, up at the top, it's categorized by each property that you own, how many days out of the year you rented it, the total gross rents received, so that gets counted as income, and then you get to deduct all of these expenses off of that income. So advertising, auto and travel, cleaning and maintenance, commission, insurance, legal and professional fees, management fees, mortgage interest, other interest, repairs, supplies, property taxes, utilities, and depreciation. So it's a significant amount of expenses that you can take off of that rental income. So a lot of times when I'm underwriting mortgage transactions and we look at Schedule E, by the time you deduct all that off, it's either at a slight loss or it's very close to zero. So yeah, there's income there, but if you're managing all of your expenses and keeping track of all of your expenses, you're really not going to pay tax on all of that income. So it's a great way to bring in income at a low tax rate. So that's how that works. Even if you had commercial property, it would go on Schedule E. And depreciation is like generally the biggest expense you'll see on there. And depreciation is just an accounting method. So that's not like insurance or repairs, those are real dollars that are coming out of your pocket as an expense, and then you're getting to deduct it on your taxes. But depreciation is just an accounting method that the IRS lets you use to write down the value of a property as it ages. So some of those deductions aren't even cash out of pocket. Yeah, so great tax benefits when it comes to real estate when you're financing it, and the interest, the mortgage interest deduction, especially as you acquire more properties, you'll likely be itemizing on your taxes. So you'll be taking the mortgage interest deduction, and that really, when you subtract that off of the rate that you're paying on a mortgage, the real rate that you pay is less than what the rate is showing on your mortgage statement because of the tax write-offs. So it's a really great way to leverage your money. Do I have another slide?
No, I'm next.
Okay. I'm out of slides. Any questions on that stuff? Sir?
I do, but I can hold them until later.
No, you're totally
No,
fine.
Fire away.
Go for it.
So when you're writing off on the depreciation to the full limit that the IRS allows, that reduces your basis or changes if you sell or exit the investment property and you sell it at a different number, you have to recognize the gain, right? Because you depreciated that asset.
Yes.
So that difference. Are you allowed? Is that where the 1031 exchange comes in, and you're allowed to go into a different property and you don't have to pay that actual gap for your tax liability?
Yes. So is anyone talking about 1031?
No,
Or should I go
actually,
through it?
that I did not plan on it, but it's a great question. So
Okay,
if you
yeah.
want to speak to that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jesse. So yeah, there's a couple ways that depreciation gets factored in on your taxes. So this is like a deduction off of your income for the year on Schedule E. But then when you own like a asset and you sell it, if you sell it for a profit, you pay capital gains tax. So there's long-term capital gains, short-term capital gains. When you own real estate, if you sell it for a profit, you're going to be taxed long-term capital gains on that real estate. So thinking in terms or thinking through the lens of an investment property, there's no exclusion for capital gains on an investment property. On a primary residence, if you own a primary residence and you've lived in it for 2 out of the last 5 years and you go to sell it, if you're a single tax filer, you can defer, or you're not required to pay capital gains on the first $250,000 in profit. If you're a married couple filing jointly, you do not have to pay any capital gains on the first $500,000 in profit. So that is a capital gains exclusion only specific to primary residences. On an investment property, there is no exclusion, but there's what's called a 1031 exchange. So if the most common scenarios I see is someone's moving out here from California, they own an investment property in California, and most people in California, it's worth $1.5 million, and they owe $500,000 on it, and they bought it for $500,000, let's say. So the capital gains is based on the cost that you paid to acquire it versus what you're selling it for. So if you paid $500,000 to acquire it, now you're selling it for $1.5 million, you're going to have $1 million in capital gains that you're potentially liable for. Now the way the calculation works is you can deduct expenses, depreciation, you can deduct any renovations that you put into the property over that period of time. So there's several things that the IRS will let you deduct off of that calculation. But for the sake of this argument, let's just say it's $1 million. If you take the $1 million and you roll it into another property that's similar in kind to the property that you're selling, so if it's a single family dwelling in California, you're going to take that $1 million and roll it into a single family dwelling in Arizona, then you defer the gains on that sale using what's called a 1031 exchange. So commonly what I see is people from California, they have so much profit in that sale that they'll split that in and buy 2 or 3 properties in Arizona. So they'll sell the one, take the $1 million, put that as a down payment on 3 or 4 homes in Arizona. If they're all single family dwellings, then it's eligible for the 1031. So the $1 million from the sale of the California property goes to a 1031 exchange company, and that's basically just like a third party that holds the money in an escrow account so that those funds never hit your bank account. So it's nice and tidy and clean from an IRS perspective, that money's never been commingled with any other money that you have. And then once you're ready to close on the new properties in Arizona, then the 1031 exchange company would wire that money to the title company to cover your down payment closing costs on the new Arizona properties. So as long as you roll all of it, then you're not paying any capital gains on the sale of the asset. But you're just deferring it, because at some point when you sell the real estate, you're going to have to pay capital gains on it if you sold it for a profit.
And then follow up.
Yeah.
From the sale of that profitable first transaction to, you said you could do one of the many, so one of those, the multiples, the purchase.
Yep.
Is there a time window? You have to get into a new property with that by a certain date?
Yeah, does anybody know the answer to that? I don't know if I know that.
90 days?
I think it's 90.
90 or
It's at
120?
least- it's at
I think it's
least-
actually, I think it's 120. You have to
You have to be
identify
under
by
contract.
90 and close by 120, I believe is what it is.
Okay.
The other thing is there is a way that essentially, like, let's say you have that $1 million and you want to keep 500 and put 500 in another property. You can do that. There's just a different strategy behind it. It will go through the 1031 exchange company still, and you will be taxed on whatever you keep. But so there is an option for that. I talked with the company about this for somebody else, so I don't have all the details on it, but I have the person who does. So if that scenario comes up, we can always explore that. But there are ways to essentially kind of be like, I want to keep a little bit for myself now. You're still going to be taxed on it, but like send the rest. You just never want it to touch your account first. So if it goes to you, there is also another way around, but it's very, it does cost more money to do it that way. And it gets messy. It's not as straightforward. So essentially you never want it to touch your account.
Okay.
If you're going to do a 1031 exchange, you have to know that before you go to sell that property.
All right.
Yeah, you don't want an IRS audit with that money
Yeah.
having gone into your account.
Yeah.
Did you have any other questions, Jesse?
No, that was it.
Okay. Yeah, and I think with just one other point on the investment properties, like a great strategy with them too is, if it's cash flowing, if you take, if you just take that rental money, and even if there's additional cash flow, say you're profiting $500 a month or whatever on the investment property, if you pay that down on the mortgage, then you can chip away that mortgage and pay that thing down and pay it off, a lot faster than a 30-year mortgage. So the average 30-year fixed rate mortgage, if you make one extra payment per year, you knock it down to a 23.5-year loan. So if you're making more than one extra payment per year, you can quickly get that thing down to the 15-year loan or less. So you could then get to retirement where you've got a portfolio of 10 or 15 properties that are all free and clear, bringing in a couple grand a month in rent, and you got 30 grand a month coming in retirement. So I think that's a great way to look at the rental properties, thinking in terms of like a longer term strategy. And then eventually when you sell them, there's gains that you're going to pay on the capital gains, but you're also selling it for a profit. So yeah, I mean, you've got, you're gonna, if you sell it and make $1 million, you're gonna pay 200 grand in capital gains probably, but you also made $1 million, and now you're netting 800. So
Yeah.
that still works.
It's not a bad day.
Yeah, it's not bad. Yeah.
Do you want to maybe speak to like if you're securing it into an LLC? Right now we're doing a business tax return, which you're not going to pay the same tax percentage as on like your income. So some people get worried about that, like, well, on your regular income percentage, right? Like you can knock that down by, securing it into
An
more of a
LLC.
business.
Yeah.
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 So
So
if you could.
And I'll touch on LLCs, but
Oh, okay. Sorry.
but yes, that's correct.
Yeah,
That's
I
a
know.
good-
I didn't know you were going to talk about it. So
No,
I
no,
just
you're
wanna
good.
make sure we.
Yeah.
do you want to?
You can jump on it. I'm just going to tell people to get an LLC, so go for it.
Yeah, well, the LLC gets tricky when it comes to a mortgage, because if you get a conventional mortgage, which is sold to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, in the deed of trust, Fannie and Freddie do not allow the title of the property to be transferred into an LLC. Now, people do it all the time, but when you have a financed conventional mortgage, if you transfer title into an LLC and the servicer finds out about it and they want to pursue you on it, they could call that mortgage due and payable because it's violating the boilerplate deed of trust that you signed at closing. So if the property's free and clear, and you put the property titles into an LLC, now you can run it like a business, and then you can have different tax advantages depending on how you have the business structure, because now the business is paying tax on it versus you personally paying tax on it. So there, that'll get beyond what I know from a tax perspective.
Consult your CPA.
Yeah,
Right.
bring in the heavy guns from the CPA.
Yeah.
But there's ways to do that for sure.
But that kind of leads into too, like with going back to your primary residence and your investment property, right? Where you can buy it as another primary. So will you let us know? So if you have a mortgage on your primary that is the primary.
Yep.
You're buying a new primary.
Yep.
What is your obligation as far as the mortgage company is concerned over here? That now this is not, because you can't have two primaries technically, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
Great question. So the obligation is 12 months. So as long as you stay in the primary residence for 12 months as your primary residence, you're not obligated to stay in it any longer than that.
Gotcha. Okay.
So part of the documents when you close on a primary residence is the owner occupancy statement. It's only binding you to 12 months. So you could within the scope of what the mortgage companies allow, you could acquire a new primary residence every 12 months and you wouldn't be at any risk.
And I think just to piggyback on that, the other requirement is that you file with the county that is now a rental dwelling. So that actually is part of you have to identify through the county that you have converted your primary into a rental property so that it no longer shows as owner occupied.
Yeah.
And then you have to update what your tax mailing address is through that as well, which will be whatever your new primary is.
Okay, yeah, good point.
I found the 1031 dates, so it's actually 45 days
Okay.
to list 3 properties, and then you have to close within 180 days of, and
180.
45 is included in that.
Okay.
So you have to list it within 45.
You
close.
have to
Identify
pick 3.
You have to identify 3, you don't have to buy
Up
all
to
3.
3.
You just have to identify 3 that are like kind that you're interested in exchanging for, and then you can do 1, 2, or 3, and then you just have to close within the 180 days.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool. Yes, sir.
So your LLC situation earlier, the question I think was if you exchange, or not exchange, I might not have the right words, if you closed on your house and called it your primary residence, and you want to then transfer the title into your LLC, you're not obligated to tell your mortgage company that you're doing that, but it's against the boilerplate language on the conventional loan. How do they find out, or is it just kind of a roll the dice situation?
Yeah, well, this is a thing where people do it all the time, and they don't get burned on it, because the only way the mortgage company really finds out is if you're missing payments, because then they're going to start looking into your loan. So the chance of them, looking into it and finding out about it is pretty low. But if they did, they could foreclose on you. So it's kind of depends on how much risk you want to take with it. Because as long as they're getting the payment, they don't really care where the payment's coming
And
from.
correct me if I'm wrong, but don't they also give you the option to essentially revert it back into your name?
I don't know.
Okay.
That part I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought I heard that somewhere, but because it's one of those things where it's like you said, unless they have a reason to look at you, they're not going to, and for tax purposes and just keeping your books clean. And that's kind of what I will say later, is that it's just tax purposes. It's easier to say this is this property, this is this property, and safer for your own personal assets also.
Yeah.
And then just to piggyback on that, one way they can find out is that you have to send in your insurance, your homeowner's insurance, just as proof every year. So you're also risking, if you don't change your homeowner's insurance and you're still primary but something happens and it's not, and somebody else is living there, right? That could be an insurance deal. So if you have to change your insurance and now your insurance form that you send them says that it's not, may or may not be noticed, but it could be a way that, so anyways, I just kind of wanted to have the conversation so that.
Yeah, that's great that you brought that up. Yeah. There's probably several ways, I didn't even think of that. There's probably several ways that you could get burned where they could find out, that it's been changed. But I would think that you would be able to put it back into your personal name because it's expensive for the lender to foreclose. So they're
Right,
probably
yeah.
going
They
to
don't-
figure out a way to.
They don't want to foreclose on
Yeah.
you. They don't want to own it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah, and I don't
Also,
think
talk to your CPA.
I don't think they can like force refi or something like that either.
What's
I
that?
don't know though. I don't think that they can even like they can't like force a refi.
Yeah, well,
To a
I mean,
different-
all you have to, because you just, like, when you move it, you essentially, like, you just have a document that it's like 2 pages. You put what you're currently have it as, what you want to move it into, take it up to the bank, they notarize it, you mail it in, you pay $50, and it's done. So you're not even, like, changing the loan, you're not changing the loan. And you could speak to that too, like, you can't take a loan out as an LLC, correct?
You could do, like, we have some lenders that will do what's called a non-QM product, where you could take the loan out as an LLC. But you're just gonna pay significantly more for that.
Right.
You know, so it's probably gonna be a 10% interest rate to do it in the name of an LLC. But then you could finance the loan in the name of the LLC and the title in the LLC at that point, because it would all be done in the name of the LLC. But I guess for me, then I would kind of wonder, like, how much benefit are you getting to pay the
Right.
higher expense? But if you started to get to the level where you had like a business and you were really operating that, you could also probably get a business loan, you know, like a commercial loan through your business to acquire residential property. You know, I've seen that where people have like a commercial loan that covers, you know, multiple properties, but then, you know, that gets outside the scope of what I do. I'm in my residential lane.
Perfect.
Okay, any other questions?
So for the account that goes towards investment properties, when you roll a primary property into an investment property, does that add onto the account?
Yes, any finance property counts in that 10 total, but the 10 total only matters when you're buying an investment property. This is kind of confusing, but if you're buying a primary residence, the lenders don't care how many finance properties.
Or a
you have.
second home, correct?
Yeah, or a second home, but if it's I'm sorry, the second home
Okay.
does count in that.
Okay.
If it's a primary residence, you avoid the number of finance properties limit, but if it's an investment property, then it counts.
So really you could have 11. 'cause
Including your
10
primary.
One would be primary and then 10 would be investment. Is that right?
I'm trying to think of how you
Like,
could.
say like you had your primary and then you made that an investment, like she was talking about, and bought a new one, and then you did that 9 more times. So couldn't you have 10 investment properties and then 1 primary?
Well, if each property you were buying was your primary, you could have an unlimited number of finance properties. But if the property that you're buying it
I
as
see
an
it.
investment property,
Okay.
that's when it's capped at 10.
Got it.
So if
So
I,
it doesn't convert back to an investment property that started out as your primary.
Correct.
wait, so I got less of that left.
If you're purchasing it as your primary, if you do like the 12-month thing,
Yep,
I said, or use that concept. So every time you buy, let's say every time you buy, you're buying as your primary.
yep,
There's no cap.
there's no cap.
And so to answer that question, then yeah, basically, if you were buying, you could buy 10 investment properties financed and own a primary,
Yeah,
or you could buy 100 if you want to move every year. Well, you'd be really old, but you could own 20 if you wanted to move every year, and they could all be financed if you wanted to.
exactly, yeah. So basically, like if I have 10 finance properties right now, I could not buy a primary residence. Or I could not buy an investment property. I could buy a primary residence. Yeah.
And then you could turn that one into an investment property by buying another primary residence a
Yes.
year later.
After 12 months. Yes.
And it doesn't, just to clarify, and it doesn't matter then the house that you lived in for a year, what you do with it.
Correct.
Okay.
It could be vacation property, it could be a rental property.
Okay.
Yeah, you can do whatever at that. You're only bound to the 12 months as a primary residence. Yeah. Yeah, so I think can be a really good way for people to acquire those additional properties, because you don't have to put as much down, and then you're getting a better rate on it too. So you can get them all at lower cost. Yeah.
Move every year.
Yeah, it just requires moving it.
For 100 years.
Yeah, I realized that as I said, 100 doesn't really make sense. All right, so we're going to talk about how I evaluate and how we look at what are good rental properties. So the first thing that I look at is where is the need, essentially. So there are certain cities, we'll just speak to Maricopa specifically, there's certain cities that in my experience are always a good deal or a good place to look at first. Southeast Valley, so like Gilbert, Mesa are two of my favorites. You can get a pretty good bang for your buck, and they rent out quickly, and your ROI ends up being really good. Scottsdale, depending on the zip code, can also be a really good investment. It's going to cost you a little bit more typically on the home itself or on your HOAs, so there's things to look at there. But you get also quick turnaround on them, so when you need to rent it out, you typically can rent it out really quickly and for a good profit too. The other thing that I'll look at is, are there new areas that might be in need? So we'll see, hey, maybe, for example, over by Buckeye, I just bought my last 2 rental properties over in Buckeye because there's a lot of expansion going on over there. And what I noticed was everything that was for rent was renting really quick, and there were a lot of opportunities to get properties for significantly lower. So we bought our last 2 in Buckeye because we saw the need is coming there, and there was a lot of growth happening. So they recently put in shopping centers, they expanded on the freeway, there's a large corporation going in over there, different stuff like that. The other thing is, for example, in Anthem, I own another property. They had a plant that was over there, and there was a lot of people coming in on 3 and 5 year contracts, but none of them were going to either be able to or wanted to purchase homes. They were coming in from other countries, and also the fact that they didn't know if they're going to be here more than maybe 3 years. So we actually got a property out there for that purpose. There was, I would say, we probably in a matter of a week had 15 people look at it and 3 apply on it. So, we look out for those things. And so what we do as your real estate team is keep an eye on what's the activity happening throughout the valley to identify those areas. We evaluate the rental rates. So the other thing would be just when we identify 5 properties that look interesting, that are in your price point, and check the boxes of whatever it is that you're looking for. I will look and see, okay, what will it rent for worst case scenario? And that's kind of the number we use to decide, do you want to buy or not? And then I'll also say, okay, but this is what it'll rent for best case scenario, and then this is what we're going to list at. So in my experience, overlisting a home for sale, terrible move. Don't do it. Overlisting a home for rent, not a bad idea, honestly, because I would say 8 times out of 10 gotten more than I thought I could get for a property by just throwing it out there and seeing. But I would only say to put it at that extreme number for like 7 to 10 days, because if you're gonna get it, you're gonna get it quickly. If you're not gonna get it, you're just gonna eat up days with a vacant home, and you might as well reduce it. Good opportunities for properties. So again, this is some stuff that we kind of always keep an eye out for. One of them the 2 that I bought in Buckeye actually were open door properties. So if you're not familiar with open door, they bought a lot of properties, especially over the last few years. They bought from owners. They were kind of like the cash offer situation, and then relisted the homes. The problem is that they overbought and overpaid, and now they're just kind of sitting. But they want them off their books. So kind of like if you guys heard about the Zillow thing, they used to buy properties, they overbought, they overpaid, and then they just needed to offload. Well, that's a great opportunity to get a really good deal on a house. So the 2 that we got in Buckeye, we were able to get the 2% seller concession on it. We got under asking, and we got it for less than what it appraised for, which means we walked into it with equity. One of them I had rented out before we even closed on it. So that's another thing I'd like to hit on. Is you can, if you know you're buying a property for an investment property, you are allowed to market it as your property, and get a tenant in line as long as you don't allow anybody outside of you and your realtor in the home unrepresented. So it still belongs to the seller, but you can market it and you can get that contract in line so that essentially you can close and know that you're gonna get it clean, take care of any repairs, and get a tenant in there and start getting checks in the mail, so or wires to your account. The other thing is distressed properties, so properties that maybe have been left vacant, they're estate sales, they're pre-foreclosure. The only thing that I kind of like to mention on that is you are likely going to have more repairs, so more upfront cash, because typically they've been neglected in one way or another. So you can get a good deal on it, but just be prepared that you're going to have probably more cash in upfront than you would on a property that, say, was sold by Open Door, because they usually go in and do all basic maintenance repairs prior to relisting it. Another one is off-market properties. We have a lot of clients who do not want to list the home on MLS. They don't want to deal with 10 showings a week and stuff like that. So they're willing to maybe take a little bit less to get it sold quicker with no foot traffic through their house. So we also keep an eye out for those, that they come through our office, they come through our network, and we can always make you aware of, hey, there's this opportunity to get a better deal on a house because they don't want to do showings, and we can run those numbers on it. So any questions on any of that? So this kind of goes, yeah.
Off-market properties, like what percentage of most of your deals do you see in off-market versus traditional?
Honestly, pretty low. I would say maybe 5-10% a year is what we are closing as a team off market. I would say it's probably pretty consistent across the board. The common thing that we see is sellers, while they're getting it ready, or maybe they're renovating a property. I know we talked about this the other day. Maybe while you're renovating, you're kind of marketing the house and seeing, hey, does anybody want to come in and swoop it up now, so that you can lock in that buyer before you're finished and know that you have a done deal. Those are a really common scenario for off market. The other thing that we see a lot is really people who are just like, I don't need to move, but hey, if you want to pay me X amount, I will. So if you have a buyer that will pay this, then I'll move. So those are not going to be our properties for rental typically, because they are usually a inflated price. They're at the make me move price, that if you give me $1 million for my house that's worth $800, yeah, I'll pack up and leave. Like, that's kind of what those are. But yeah, they're definitely out there, and so we see off-market properties through just our brokerage. I would say, like 4 or 5 times a day. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's that they're going to be coming on soon. I mean, we have one right now that it's off-market. They'll list in January, but they'll allow showings in October. So it's one that we're marketing. We're trying to get kind of sold before it goes on the market, but that's also another common scenario. Good. All right. Well, welcome back from our intermission. So, this goes into a little bit more depth on something that Jeff was talking about earlier. This is what basically is evaluating what your ROI is going to be. I have so many clients who are very insistent on, like, why would I finance a rental property, and they think it's a bad thing to do. And this is my favorite thing to show, because just quick numbers here, we're looking at a property for $375,000, putting 20% down, taking into consideration your taxes, HOA, insurance, all of that, compared to $375,000 paying cash. And then it takes into account basically your depreciation, all of that. And then it looks at what your ROI is. So your ROI on a finance deal for this amount is about 10.9%, almost 11%. Cash is 7.1%. So, and then also you're getting the tax benefits of when you're financing it too, all the stuff that Jeff talked about earlier. The reason for this is exactly what Jeff said. You're putting in this case, $75,000 down. So how much you're putting into it is less than if you were putting $375,000 down, but you're still getting the return as if it was an investment of $375,000. So I know that kind of jumps around with a lot of different numbers, but basically this is a sheet that if you message us, we're able to give this over to you. It's an Excel sheet. You can plug and play, and so you can kind of play with your numbers. Basically, don't touch any of this. Let this do the work for you. You're going to fill in just these sections over here to look at what is your return and what's your outcome. So when I'm running properties for investors, I will often run the numbers up here. If I know that they're going to finance, I'll run the numbers up here with what I know they're going to put down. I put in how much I think that they can get for their rent. Like I mentioned before, we do best case, worst case scenario. So I run 2 scenarios on every property. Best case scenario, you're going to get X. Worst case scenario, you're going to get X. And then you can see if at the end of the day, the numbers make sense for you on it. And a worst case scenario is really what you want to look at to make a decision, but it's good to know what I truly believe is your best case scenario. Does anybody have questions on that? Like I said, I can send this out to you because, if you're working through me, we're going to use this ourselves, but it's always kind of fun to just play with some numbers when you're looking at it and trying to figure out different scenarios that would work for you. So, okay, I'm going to go into option versus self-managed versus property manager, but before that, does anybody have questions just on like evaluating and choosing properties? Good. Okay, so a common misconception is that essentially if you want to have rental properties, you have to have a property manager. Property manager costs money, so now you're taking from your profit. There are some good property management companies out there. There's a lot of not so great property management companies that are expensive. On average, they're somewhere between 6 and 10% that they take of whatever you're renting the property for. Some have flat fees that may be a little bit less, but then they'll also have, say, like a $50 or $75 charge every time a tenant contacts you or contacts them for a maintenance repair. And you have no control over what that tenant is contacting them on. So that can add up pretty quickly too. I personally believe unless you do not want to be hands-on at all, let's say maybe you live in a different country, you travel a lot, or you just want to be hands-off, I think self-managing them is the way to go. It is not that difficult and it's not that time-consuming. The most time-consuming part is going to be really the first 7 to 10 days after a tenant moves in, and that's because you have somebody new in the property that's going to figure out hey, this light switch doesn't work, or hey, this AC unit isn't turning down when I push the button, or whatever it may be. So plan for that first about week to 2 weeks that you're going to have probably the most amount of phone calls from that tenant and also some extra expenses, because some of the issues may be quick, easy fixes and just them learning the property. But some may be things that you weren't aware of because, one, you've never lived in the house on many occasions, or you haven't for a while. And then also different things are important to different tenants. So maybe this faucet always leaks, but this tenant didn't care, and now this tenant is super annoyed that this faucet is leaking. So it may be something that has always been there and you just weren't aware of it. In terms of the pros and the cons of each, self-managing, so you save money. The decision making, in my opinion, is easier because you get to use the contacts that you know and trust. So the other thing is, before you put a tenant in place, it's good to have at least 2, maybe 3 contacts for each item. So your plumbing, your electrician, your handyman, your AC company, roofing company. Your first one is going to be your go-to, your favorite person that you always want to use. Your second one is your backup plan. You trust them, but maybe they're a little bit more expensive. And your third, maybe you haven't used them before, but they're kind of just in your back pocket. They have good reviews. You feel comfortable that if, hey, worst case scenario, my first 2 plans fall through, I have this third one in place. That will make it easier to handle just any maintenance calls that may happen. For example, I had one of my properties in Buckeye, we had the AC for some reason was not functioning right, and it was like 9 o'clock at night, and we had to call 2 or 3. So I say self-managed. I'm not gonna lie, Lisa helps me with phone calls. But
Lisa
I'm also
managed.
Lisa managed, but I'm also running my team. At one time I have personally self-managed, I think 4 or 5 of our properties, but I just choose not to now. I'm a little hypocritical, but still, it was like 9, 10 o'clock at night, and we did have to call, I think, 3 different companies in order to get somebody to respond quickly. So I was glad that we had those contacts on hand to figure out who we needed, because it was end of July, 100 and something outside at night, and this family has kids and their AC wasn't working. I had to fix it. So making sure you have those contacts in line. Getting comfortable with the investment, I think, is the other thing. Basically, you're putting all this money in. Don't you want to kind of be a little bit more hands-on? Like, in my opinion, I'm not gonna necessarily go buy a Ferrari and then give it to somebody else to drive. I want that. I want to make sure it's being cleaned on time, the tires are being rotated, the right gas is being put in, right? Like, you want to be in control of your own investment, your own property, your own money. Basically, property management would be the opposite of all of that. The negatives of doing it is, like I said, time-consuming and challenging. So I managed all mine until I had my second son, and then I was tapped out. So that's when I said, hey, Lisa, I'm going to need your help on these maintenance calls. So that is the negative of it, is depending on how many properties you have, what you do for a living, what your family setup is. It is, and how many, well, I think I said how many properties you have, it can be time-consuming. And extra work to know the laws and what you are required to do, what you're not required to do. So, for example, I had one tenant who was complaining that there were no sunscreens on the windows. Well, I don't have to put sunscreens on the windows. That's an accessory to a property, not a requirement. That does not make it not livable. Her complaint was that when she keeps the windows open, bugs are coming in. So, don't keep the windows open when you don't have screens on the windows. So, but knowing what you do and do not have to do, because if you don't know, and maybe there's a tenant who is been a tenant for years and years in multiple properties, they may try to get away with some things and push a little bit harder on, hey, maybe I can get new windows if I complain enough about X, Y, and Z, and knowing that, no, if these are functional and they are safe and secure, I do not have to do that for you. So knowing those things, honestly, Google has a lot of great resources, so you can find out a lot of things there. The fact is, you can look at the Landlord-Tenant Act online anytime. That's going to cover all of what you do and do not have to do. And then, of course, reach out to us. We're always able to answer questions. And again, if we don't know the answer, then we can at least help figure it out for you. Does anybody have questions on property management versus self-managed? Or need Lisa's phone number?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So if you have a rental property, and as far as landscaping, can you require them to have landscaping or
It's a great
maintain
question.
it to a certain degree? Or?
Yep. So part of the lease is always going to be identifying who is responsible for a landscaping, pool maintenance if there's a pool, pest control, and then other. So personally, I don't like buying properties for rental with pools because it's extra maintenance and extra things that could go wrong, and pool breaks and and then if you either taking on that maintenance responsibility yourself, so you're adding to your expenses and your regular cost, or you're giving it to the tenant for them to potentially not do and have your pool turn green. They move out, and now you have to still address it and fix whatever's wrong.
Deferred maintenance is huge.
Deferred maintenance is worse than just doing maintenance.
Right.
But yeah, you can identify that, or you could say hey, up to, maybe the tenant is responsible for doing your landscape maintenance in the backyard, but you'll cover the cost of the maintenance in the front yard. Or you can kind of work out different ways of doing that. Personally, I usually have my tenant handle the landscape maintenance and the pest control. that's because I think that I have all long-term rental properties. My tenants usually stay for a while. I give approval for them to add plants if they want to, stuff like that. So if they're gonna add plants, I'm not gonna pay to maintain them. And so I let them handle that. And then pest control, everybody has different preferences, different sensitivities in terms of chemicals and who they wanna use. So I'm not gonna force my company on them. But I will always have my property landscaped, like maintained or cleaned up, and pest control treated prior to putting a new tenant in place, so that I know that I'm giving them kind of a fresh start, fresh slate, and I'm not asking them to maintain whatever the last tenant left behind. So, does that make sense?
It does. Thank
Yeah.
What kind of range do you see for property management? I know you don't use them a lot, but have you
Yeah.
looked on the market, or
Yeah,
and also
so-
how do you evaluate not just by the price, but the quality, if they're decent or incredible or not?
Yeah. So range is usually mostly, so if you look online, it's gonna say like 6 to 12%. In my experience in our market, I've seen closer to like 7 to 10%. So that would be like throughout Maricopa. Like I said, there are a few that are like flat rates. I think that they probably have the lower end of the service. When it comes to figuring out what the right places are for it, I definitely look at reviews, and then honestly ask us, because we deal with a lot of property management companies in what we do. So even though I don't personally use them, we represent landlords, we represent tenants, so we have come across them in many different ways. Abby has done a lot of research on property management companies also to kind of see what are they offering. So we have a little PowerPoint of, I think, the top 3 that we thought were worth looking at and like worth considering if somebody does want it. So we do have a PowerPoint put together of the top 3 property management companies that we think would have the best service for the best price. So they're not necessarily the cheapest, but you're getting a you know, the good service, the quality service. Thank you for what you're paying for. But honestly, aside from that, like, I think reviews are huge, because the fact is a lot of the reviews are going to come from tenants, but that's important because you as the landlord want to know what our tenant's going to look at your property. And so there's because this will be sent out to a lot of people and online, I'm not going to say what company it is. There is a company that I can tell you when tenants come to me and they say like, hey, I'm looking at this property, I'll be like, I just want you to know, like, I've had other people who have rented from this property management company and had a terrible experience. And it was on the landlord side too a little bit, but mostly on the tenant side. And so that means that there's gonna be tenants that maybe don't wanna look at your property because you're with the wrong property management company. So it is very important to do your research before you pick one. It's definitely not all about price. Other things to consider, so LLC. I do believe it's best to put it into an LLC for easier tax purposes, just to keep everything kind of streamlined into like, here's the expenses for this property, here's the expenses for this property, which also goes into separate accounts. With that, I mean like bank accounts, or like if you have one account for all of your rental properties. So for example, we have an account that if we need to have the AC company go out, there's a credit card that's associated with that account, that's what that gets paid on. So we know everything on that credit card is related to our rental properties. We have an account that all rent goes to when it's paid, because most rents get paid now through either an online link or Venmo or Wire or something like that. So all of that money automatically goes to this separate account, just to keep track of everything, again, for tax purposes and to avoid the commingling. So we can see what's coming in and what's going out. But Sarah brought up a lot of great points when it comes to LLCs. So again, we are not tax professionals. Consult your CPA or whoever it is that you talk to with taxes.
Jen, do you have a separate account for each property that you have?
So we have one credit card, but separate physical like checking accounts.
Okay.
Honestly, that's just because my husband is a finance guy and he's crazy. So he's the one who, like, he's just very on top of that, and he does our taxes and everything. So for us, that's how he's able to keep everything clean and organized with the amount of properties that
So
we're
any
looking at.
expenses you put on the card, even though
Correct.
it's for 4 different properties.
Correct.
But you have a checking account for each
Yeah.
of the 4?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's correct. Yeah, we have a checking account for each of them, 1 credit card. The reason is we just didn't want to open 4 credit cards.
Yeah.
But we're able to, we just track it. So something else I'll go into next is Turbo Tenant. So in there, Turbo Tenant has, I'll explain it in a second, but it has a section where I can say, here's an expense that we charge to our credit card. So at the end of the year, yes, we have all of our credit card expenses on 1 card, but he can pull a report out of Turbo Tenant per property to see how much was at each property from that credit card. So Turbo Tenant is a great tool, especially if you're self-managing. So it has an option to run your background check directly through it. You can store all of your lease docs on it, which allows your tenant to see it and you to see it. So super helpful to put, you have an executed lease, it goes into that system for that property. And everybody's able to view it. So nobody can say, I never received a copy of my lease, because they got a link to their Turbo Tenant account, which is free for your tenant. It costs you money if you have more than 1 property in it. So, or more than 1 bank account in it. So, I don't know why you have 2 bank accounts and only 1 property. But it costs you money if you're gonna have more than that, but I can't remember off the top of my head. It was pretty minimal. I wanna say it was somewhere around like $20-25 for the year. But so you can, it has an option to do messaging and communication through there. So a tenant can actually submit their maintenance request to you. So essentially your own property management system. And like I said, you can collect rent through there. So that's also been helpful, especially for certain properties. Let's say Abby actually has a tenant client right now who it's 2 brothers and then a friend that's going to be there. They all probably are paying their portion of rent. Well, through Turbo Tenant, if the landlord was using that, those 3 individuals living in there can all pay their portion separately. So it doesn't have to be one lump sum. Or for some people, they want to pay, so if they get paid every 2 weeks from their job, maybe they want to pay half the rent in the first check and half the rent in the second check, they can do that too. So it allows a lot of flexibility on that. It also, not that I'd recommend this for a tenant, but it does allow a tenant to pay with a credit card. So I think that's again, kind of not the best solution for a tenant, but if, things happen, if that's what they want to do or need to do, it's a great option for them that they're able to easily jump on there and do it. And it's very user-friendly on both sides. So I have currently 3 of my 4 tenants are using it, because we just started using it about 1.5 years ago. And all 3 have actually really liked the system so far. And 2 of them have been utilizing the chat on there, which is nice because you can track the history of when you receive the requests. And it also allows you to check off when things are done. You can schedule maintenance. So for example, check out our social media pages. We talk about monthly maintenance tips. But you want to check every year for termites. You want to check your roof every year. You want to check your ACs twice a year, stuff like that. Well, you can schedule all of that for each property as a reminder for you. It'll send you an email or a message, however you choose to set that up, and it'll remind you that, hey, this regular maintenance needs to be done on your property. So cool functions there. We talked about having the right contacts for the different areas. So MLS listing versus landlord listing. So this is another question I get a lot. If you want to list your own property as the landlord, you definitely can do that. You can save on commissions that way. Just keep in mind, you're going to be the one getting all the phone calls, meeting the people there, or you're giving them the combo to a lockbox to allow people to just walk through your house. I do not recommend that for security purposes. You are, in my opinion, you should always have a realtor or yourself there for every showing. But you could still do it yourself and save on the commission there. And by doing that, you can list it on Zillow as for lease by owner and still get it out. Zillow is one of the biggest places that people are going to look. You can put it on other rental sites, but you're going to have to manually go in and do that. It's not going to automatically show up on all of those. When you do it through MLS with a realtor, it does not automatically show up on Zillow. We still go in and put that in, but we're covering that expense for you because there is an expense to list it on Zillow. I think it's like $15 for a month or something like that, so it's not a lot, but we're handling all of that input for you. And then it will, by going to MLS, it will hit the other websites. So I think it's like apartments.com, Rent My Home or something like that. There's different websites that it'll automatically go to. But in terms of like which is better, it honestly just depends on what your availability is to handle showings. And the fact is, going on MLS, I'm not saying it's just because we're realtors, but going on MLS, you're going to get more eyes on it because you are hitting more people who either by automatically going to all these other places or just people who are looking with a realtor. By doing landlord only listing, a little bit more of your upfront time, and then, like I said, your showing time. Any questions on that stuff? Oh, pro tip. Always, no matter how much you think somebody seems nice and friendly and like a great tenant, always run a background check, a credit check, and an eviction check. Credit check does not necessarily, like say they have low credit, but they have great income. To me, that's not an automatic reason to say no to them. The credit checks that you run, and we have some recommended services here, including the one that's through TurboTenant, it will show you why their credit is low. It may not get into like the nitty gritty of it, but it's gonna show you, was it a medical bill? Was it student loans? Was it that they didn't pay a credit card? And it'll show you what months did they not pay, how late were they, stuff like that. So you can see like, what's the story here? So I honestly have typically all of my tenants, except for one, have bad credit. Like they would have a hard time probably getting a loan, and that's probably why they're renting. So that's the other thing to be aware of. You probably are gonna get a lot of tenants that maybe don't have great credit, but see where the issue is, see where the history is. I made a mistake very early on in being a landlord before I even was in real estate. One of my first properties, I let somebody live there despite what all of that told me. So I did run a background check and a credit check and an eviction report. All three showed me red flags, but she gave me this story that made me feel bad for her with her and her kids and abusive acts and all this stuff. And in the end, when they moved out, it cost me $30,000 in repairs that we then had to go through litigation for and are still waiting for payment on. So, you know, I learned the hard way, but, you know, so learn from my mistake. This isn't going to be your tell-all, but it is important to look at it. And if you do choose to do for lease by owner, and you get a background check or a credit check that's questionable, feel free to reach out and, you know, run it by me too if you want. I'm happy to look at it and give my opinion on it. But it is, do not skip it. That's all I can say, do not skip it ever. When it comes to, meeting your tenants. So I always like to meet my tenants, and that could even be over Zoom if it needs to be. But just getting to know the person, you also, if you're going to self-manage especially, you want them to feel comfortable contacting you if they need anything. So, all right, well that was it for me. Does anybody have any questions? All right, so who's next? AJ, Allie. So real quick, so there are Fidelity and AJF, they have investor discounts on their fees. So Fidelity 30%, and I think AJF is the same.
I think we take off, it's not a lot.
Okay.
It's about 25.
Okay.
Just because each inspection is
Right.
different. But yeah. Perfect. All right. I love it. So I'm sure, are most people in here familiar with a home inspection? Has had one at some point in time? Okay,
Yes.
good. Perfect. So I think just a couple key things to consider, and especially when you're doing the investment properties, because again, you're looking at your return, right? Like, if I spend this much, how much do I have to do for maintenance? What are the big ticket items? And all the costs up front that are associated with it. I think it's just important to know just a few reminders on what the home inspection is, like what we do and don't do. And so all home inspectors in Arizona are licensed by the state of Arizona. So we're licensed by the Arizona Department of, Arizona Board of technical registration, excuse me. So we do have a standards of practice that we have to adhere to and follow based on our report. It is a visual inspection for all the accessible major systems and components of the home, and it is for the conditions of that day and time. And why I say that is important because things happen and things break, and so sometimes we do get calls where, you know, their inspection was, you know, a certain amount of time ago, and you know, the garage door broke or something happened and it was functioning on that day of the inspection, and that's just kind of part of like the home ownership. And our goal is to help you eliminate the risk, or excuse me, mitigate the risk, but we can't help you eliminate the risk. And so it's just making your informed decisions, because no matter what, if it's you're purchasing it for your primary residence as an investment, you need to make sure you're having the third party opinion to do what's best for you and your own financials. And so that's really our goal, just to present the facts of the home. Again, visual is just what do we mean? It's like what we can see. So if you are going in a home and there's lots of personal belongings, furniture, it's not vacant, you don't know the conditions, we're not allowed to move or dismantle systems and components, so we can only do as much as we can see. Again, I think the key thing that what we're looking for you is functionality. So you can do the cosmetic stuff, like especially if you're purchasing an investment property, you know, you have to do some major upfront work. You know, you're looking at like kitchen remodels and all that, but we're really helping you decide like, are things functioning as intended? What does the plumbing look like? What does the electrical look like? Those are your really big ticket items. You said the pool. Pools are really expensive. People don't realize that. That was actually a really interesting comment for when you're looking at like rental properties. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, I don't think I'd want a pool actually. Mm-hmm. Like for my own personal, I like having a pool, but like, you know, it's a lot of maintenance and upkeep, and sometimes people don't think that. And so you have some upfront costs with that. What do we not inspect? Like I said, cosmetic issues, anything that's considered like accessory personal. So we don't do water softeners, RO systems, because you're looking at like water treatment really is the functionality, and we're not testing your water. Washer dryer, this is an interesting one. We actually just had something come up on that one, but we don't like run your washer and dryer through a load. But what we do is we'll look, as long as we can see it, is it connected? Is there connections there? If obviously if there's not one there, it's easy for us to see, but is there excess dryer lint or something that could be like a safety hazard? But sometimes if you have those stacked washer dryers, like we can't see behind there, so we may not be able to see the connections. And so that's just something to be aware of. We do not actually like run a full load. Alarms, irrigation, those are things that we are not looking at. What types of inspections? I just put that on there so you know, but obviously typical residential, commercial, new construction. The way that our company works is we've always been really kind of that one-stop shop mindset. But we truly want to deliver valuable services at the highest level, and that's how we always have operated, because we're really particular about our training. Because not all inspectors are created equal, just like you have to vet out your different companies for plumbing and HVAC. It's the same thing with inspection companies. What are their training? What's their customer service? And so we don't want to just deliver additional inspections to you just to like say, oh, we can add on extra money to do it, but like really, are they valuable to you, and do we think they're worthwhile depending on your situation? So termite inspections, always do them. They're really common in Arizona. We offer it at $69 and we get you a free termite warranty. So just so you know, if you do that, and even if you have tenants in the property, like if they see termites, we'll do a spot treatment. If it was clear when we did the inspection, they do a spot treatment for that. And if there were active evidence or something like that, you get a report from a termite company or a pest control company that will do the termite remediation. You don't need to, that's not to say you have to hire them. That's just when you're in your process going through purchasing the home with your Binzer and all that, you kind of have an idea of what it would cost to treat. That's mold. That's a big one. We just had a situation where somebody did an inspection like 7 months ago and ended up having leaks. Apparently it put evidence of water intrusion and had offered multiple times to do a mold air quality test, and they chose not to. And then once they found the leaks and they had to open up a ton of walls. There was something that wasn't connected properly, and so that was causing it. Obviously, like, we couldn't have found that, but if you had done a mold test in that situation, there was mold in the walls and it was a whole thing, the air quality would have picked up on some sort of issue, so you could have really had that knowledge during your inspection periods before moving in. It's unfortunate, but like, those are situations that like are really important. If we find evidence of, you know, water intrusion in certain areas of the home, like, doing the mold assessment is a good idea for that peace of mind, especially if it's an investment property and you're putting people in there, just because you need to know those things. Down the road, it's just more costly. So we can do that. It's basically what we do as an air quality test, and so we have a special machine, and we take, depending on the square footage of the home, typically it's like up to like 2,000 square feet, I think, is 3 air samples that will do a baseline outside, and then we take in a few parts of the home, like bathrooms, kitchen, places where there's more likely to be water or moisture, and basically you'll get it, we overnight it to our lab in Florida, and you'll get a report. Usually they're really quick on the report, so within a few days, 3 to 5 business days we say, and they'll tell you if there's elevated levels of mold. Mold's everywhere, it's just whether it's elevated enough to cause you risk. We can also swab it. If you see potential for mold, or if you see something that looks like mold, we put that in the report, but we can't actually like tell you if it is until you swab it and know what's happening. So that's mold. Radon, has anybody heard of radon? Done radon testing? Anybody's done it?
Yeah.
Okay. It's really interesting because we're doing so much more so over the last year even, and I think it's too because people are moving from other parts of the country that it's just what you do. I mean, there are certain states that require it as part of the inspection period. Not to say that you have to radon test every home you live in, but it is an option. It's a odorless gas that if there's elevated levels can cause, you know, health issues and things like that to certain people. And so remediation isn't really that scary. It's a few $1,000s, but people sometimes get really freaked out by it, and so it's just an option. It's something to be aware of. And then the last thing that I wanted to bring up is the sewer scope. So I think this is really important.
Oh, sorry. You have a sewer scope. Do you want to see that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we should just go here. So has anybody done any sewer, like the main sewer line, like a video sewer scope? Okay, good.
You guys actually did it on his house.
But did it turn out okay?
No.
No.
So you're really happy you did it, right?
We broke a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
we fixed it.
awesome. So we launched our sewer scope. Not awesome, but great that you did it. That your agent recommended it to you too. But we started our sewer scope division it's been about 2 years, I think, and we did it differently. We have a separate division, so it's AJF team members, but they're our sewer scope technicians, and so they have prior experience in the sewer line industry or plumbing. And so they really do know, they are experts in that type of field and industry because there are nuances to it. It's kind of like having an HVAC look at your, you know, electrical. Like they probably have some, you know, sense, but they're not necessarily trained, and that's what they've saw, and they've done thousands of scopes, and they just know. So that's how we've done it differently. And what is the sewer line inspection? It's basically they take a video camera. We have top line equipment, so we use Rigid, which is the best camera you can buy on the market. It's not cheap, but again, it's HD quality and you can see everything. And so that's how we've outfitted our sewer line trucks and our vehicles. Just because again, like it's just such an important piece. Like you don't want to do it half. Mm-hmm. You know, we want to do it the right way. So that's how we looked at it. Anyway, so it's a video camera, so it's from the main of your house to the city street, the main sewer line. And why is that important? Because sewer lines are really expensive to repair if there are issues. You can have, I think, some of the common defects we see. I don't know if I put it in there. Oh, you did. Oh, perfect. Okay. So roots. So good. So this is all from our
client care specialist.
Thank you. This is all from our own sewer line camera and video and inspections. But roots are pretty common here. You know, they can grow, and sometimes it's because of cracks in the sewer line, which could be a bigger issue. Sludge and grease buildup is just over time, you know, just soap and all that stuff just builds up, and it can potentially back up your system depending on how long that's been happening. Belly is like here where you see that negative slope. It's a low point in the line. The offset is when 2 sections of your sewer line don't line up correctly. This is rust and scaling, and it's just aging of the pipes. Holes and cracks, you can see that really big crack right there. That could cause some root intrusion, environmental shifts, things like that. Cast iron, clay, that's just a type of plumbing that's been deteriorating, and eventually will just go bigger and can't be patched, and it's just aged out of its lifespan. And then Orangeburg is actually a type of plumbing material that they used probably in the, I want to say like 60s, 70s, and it's deteriorating. So if there's Orangeburg, you have to replace it. There's no other option. It's literally just crackling. So if you're looking at homes in Tempe, Sun City, those were built with Orangeburg. So you definitely want to do a sewer line inspection. Some parts of Scottsdale, the older parts, Phoenix, things like that. And again, it's just arming yourself with now being able to get plumbing companies out there. We have a couple that we trust, and they actually will take our sewer scope video because they know the video, the quality we put in the sewer line, how many feet is the defect that we're seeing, and so they can quote off our report. And we know they're not upselling because that is definitely common practice. Sometimes, just like just like service companies, it's like you have to vet them out to know, if you're getting like the true cost or if you're really getting like upsold on an issue. And so we've done that. But so a lot of these can be some bigger defects, like the Orangeburg cast iron, holes and cracks. Like you're gonna need to repair that piping material. Holes and cracks, that doesn't necessarily mean they have to repair the entire line. They can sometimes just repair part of that line. Sometimes bellies, sludge, roots can be done with something called hydrojetting. And so that's just common maintenance and practice. It's just like a big power washer to your line. And so you don't always have to rebuild the entire line. It's just knowing that knowledge and being able to say, okay, I'm gonna hydrojet out every few years just to maintain that line just like a car so that I don't have to have the backup and all that stuff happening. Offset, you're gonna have to repair, things like that. So I think when you're looking at investment, when I'm looking at these additional services, we see even issues on the new build inspections right now. So we're really recommending sewer line inspections on new builds. People don't realize because they're getting new homes, get an inspection on new builds. Maybe you're buying it as an investment opportunity. Please also have an inspection, just because it's up to the builder to correct things. And again, it's just making sure you have the knowledge, power to make those important decisions so you're not going into a money pit, which will then offset into your financial goals of, earning money on that property.
And renovated homes.
Because
you don't know who poured what down the drain.
Yeah, no, we had a sewer scope where somebody poured grout down the drain.
Yeah.
Grout's gonna harden. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
But you can't control who did the work.
Yeah.
So you have that power. I think that was in terms of the sewer. Does anybody have any questions so far on kind of different types of services? If you do the sewer line inspection with us, the reason we also did it this way is because we're not plumbing companies, so we don't have skin in the game, so we're not quoting you off repairs, and so that's just important. Accessibility, you try to go through the clean outs in the yard. Sometimes they're covered, so we do our best to be able to locate where they are with a locator, or if it's a single story flat roof, we can go on the roof through the roof fence. Last case scenario is like if there's no way for us to access it, and the seller's willing to pull a toilet, we can do that. We've had a couple times that's happened, but it's also not our home, so if they're willing, we can do that. And so that's it. I think that's probably key on the different types and where things are more costly. Back to mold, if you get spuds, there's been a prior leak, things like that. It's hard for us to say, if something, especially in Arizona, it's dry, we'll take a moisture meter to it and it doesn't rain that much. So we can't tell you if it's active. Maybe the sellers can show you receipt of repairs and proof that they've done different things to repair it. But otherwise, it's do your own due diligence and just make sure that it was properly repaired. There's no evidence of mold and things like that. So that's where I would just be cognizant. I just put this in here because I think it's just interesting, especially as you're kind of reading through inspection reports can be a little sometimes overwhelming depending on your experience with buying and purchasing homes. And I have some of this too in flyers if anybody wants it. But we have these as our top 10 common inspection findings because honestly 9 times out of 10 you're gonna see this on a report, and most of the time they're pretty minor. They're not that costly. Missing anti-tip bracket is like that little piece on your oven. Usually if it's a remodel, it's like in the drawer. And you just put it on so that child safety, like a child pulls on it, oven doesn't fall over. Not expensive. GFCI issues, again, inflation. So it's maybe like, a little bit more expensive to go to Home Depot, but just to replace your GFCI outlets, that's pretty common. The missing dishwasher sanitary high loop is really common. It basically is a way that dirty water doesn't get back into the dishwasher, but like you may see that a lot. It's not that expensive to repair. Flex piping on the TPR discharge pipe is it's just like a safety manual if the it's a safety feature. Dripping or leaking faucets is more maintenance, so it's just like common maintenance items that you're gonna see, but shouldn't be too crazy unless there's more under the sink or more things that you see. That's different follow-up. Missing anti-siphon, again, that's maybe $10 now at Home Depot, but it basically just, if you're gonna keep your hose hooked up to it, it just prevents hose water from going to your drinking water, is really what it is. Mine's leaking, so we just took off the anti-siphon.
And that's why most people take it off.
Cracked or broken roof tiles. If you have roof issues, like roof is a big ticket item. So if we put in the report, follow up with a roofing specialist. You want to know, what you're looking at for repairs. But those are pretty, broken roof tiles are pretty common. It becomes an issue if like the underlayment's exposed, or you have a lot of like buildup and debris that could cause like flashing issue or different things like that could become more of an issue. Missing or damaged stucco, like it's just things to be aware of. Just it's not too much to repair, but that could be like water or pest intrusion if you do have a lot of that. The non-fire rated pull downstairs is more of just like a safety thing that we have to put in the report for attic access, like in the garage. If they're not fire rated and a garage happens in the fire, it's supposed to like contain the fire for you. And if they're non-fire rated, it's gonna go up back into your home quicker, essentially. So it's a safety thing, but shouldn't be too hard to be able to fire rate those pull downstairs, really. And then AC condensate leaks. This is one that is very common, but just because it's common doesn't mean we shouldn't follow up and make sure that the leak is not active and that they've had the unit serviced. Basically now you could see AC condensate, although we haven't really had much of a monsoon season here, which is crazy. But they occur now during monsoon season. So when the humidity is high, your condensate can leak, and basically over time, if you have like your debris pan and you don't address it, and maybe your AC is in the attic or something, it could overflow, and then you're causing bigger issues. And so like we had a situation, I don't know, I just tell stories because sometimes it puts it into play, but you feel bad. The client called, I think we did the inspection in January, so it's dry. Nothing's happening. We called out condensate leak in the report, and now it's monsoon season, and they have like water coming. It was coming into the garage, but it was going into like where the house goes. So now they have moisture issues, and it was coming from the condensate leak because they didn't follow up and find out if the leak had been repaired or not. And it was not repaired, and so now you just have it dripping, and now you have mold, and now you have all these other issues that come into play. And also at that time, like just like you vet your agents, like not all agents are educated on different pieces, and they say, oh, that's common, don't worry about it. Mm-hmm. So they didn't do anything about it. So this is just knowledge to know that sometimes they're very common, but like make sure you just follow up on some of these bigger things that could cause more issue down the road, and just being aware. So I think it's windows, HVAC, roof, sewer line. Those are all big ticket items that you need to just have your people out. Pool. What else? Did I miss
Those are the
anything?
main ones. Those are the big ticket items.
Those are big.
Water heaters sometimes, depending on the issue.
True. And that depends too if you're going to get a home warranty or not on your house. I mean, that's a whole other conversation, whatever you decide to do. But they'll want to know if you follow up on some of these issues. Any questions so far? Perfect. So I think that just, again, tips for as a buyer, or if you're selling your home, whatever the case is, just like I mentioned, we evaluate for conditions for that day and time. Things can change prior to moving in. Just be aware of your scope and limitations. not necessarily for investment, but sometimes depending on your negotiation, like it's not always a to-do list for the seller. So you really just want to make sure you're looking at those big ticket items because that's going to help you in that negotiation process. But that's when a stellar agent and team can kind of help you work through that process. And also we're a critical piece of the transaction. Like you need to know what you're buying. Seller should have home accessible, provide access, you know, all those pieces of it. And just like I said before, we can reduce risk, but we can't mitigate. So, yeah, have your people and all the things.
Thank you.
I hope that was helpful.
Yes, very much.
So thank you guys for having me too. And any questions, like if you're ever not sure, like at least I can say with my company, call us. Like we're here to be a resource for you guys. Like if you get a quote after the inspection, and it seems really high, we just did this for somebody who called. They had like, we called out roofing issues and they had like 3 different quotes, buyers and sellers. And the sellers, they were communicating, they wanted to fix it, but they were all, the roof, it was all over the place, like all over. And so they were like, you know, buyer wants this, seller, like, they're like, who do we believe? And so we're like, all right, well, I have a different company. Let me see if they'll go out and at least just provide you from us where it's nobody else, like another quote. And so they're able to kind of base that information. So like, use your people as a resource. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was fun.
All right, well, thank you. So, sorry, we
Is
ran.
that it?
That's it. So
Oh.
we ran a little bit long. I'm sorry. Thank you guys for coming. If you have any additional questions, feel free to hang out. We can chat about those. If you scan the QR code, it'll just ask for some information that lets us know you want the spreadsheet to look at what your ROI is, and you want the slides, and any other information that you may want from us. So feel free to do that, and we will get all that over to you. Thank you again, and thank you to AJF, Jeff Smith, Tiger Home Loans, and Jen with Fidelity. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
And then the last thing that I wanted to bring up is the sewer scope. So I think this is really important.
Oh, sorry.
for-
You have a sewer scope. Do you want to see that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we should just go here. So, has anybody done any sewer, like the main sewer line, like a video sewer scope? Okay, good.
You guys actually did it on his house.
But did it turn out okay?
No.
No.
I'm really happy you did it, right?
We broke a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
we fixed it.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we launched our sewer scope. Not awesome, but great that you did it. That your agent recommended it to you too. But we started our sewer scope division it's been about 2 years, I think, and we did it differently. We have a separate division, so it's AJF team members, but they're our sewer scope technicians, and so they have prior experience in the sewer line industry or plumbing. And so they really do know, they are experts in that type of field and industry because there are nuances to it. It's kind of like having an HVAC look at your, electrical. Like they probably have some, sense, but they're not necessarily trained, and that's what they've saw, and they've done thousands of scopes, and they just know. So that's how we've done it differently. And what is the sewer line inspection? It's basically they take a video camera. We have top line equipment, so we use Rigid, which is the best camera you can buy on the market. It's not cheap, but again, it's HD quality and you can see everything. And so that's how we've outfitted our sewer line trucks and our vehicles. Just because again, like it's just such an important piece. Like you don't want to do it half.
Mm-hmm.
We want to do it the right way. So that's how we looked at it. Anyway, so it's a video camera, so it's from the main of your house to the city street, the main sewer line. And why is that important? Because sewer lines are really expensive to repair if there are issues. You can have, I think, some of the common defects we see. I don't know if I put it in there. Oh, you did. Oh, perfect. Okay. So roots. So good. So this is all from our
client care specialist.
Thank you. This is all from our own sewer line camera and video and inspections. But roots are pretty common here. They can grow, and sometimes it's because of cracks in the sewer line, which could be a bigger issue. Sludge and grease buildup is just over time, just soap and all that stuff just builds up, and it can potentially back up your system depending on how long that's been happening. Belly is like here where you see that negative slope. It's a low point in the line. The offset is when 2 sections of your sewer line don't line up correctly. This is rust and scaling, and it's just aging of the pipes. holes and cracks. You can see that really big crack right there. That could cause some root intrusion, environmental shifts, things like that. Cast iron clay, that's just a type of plumbing that's been deteriorating and eventually will just go bigger and can't be patched, and it's just aged out of its lifespan. And then Orangeburg is actually a type of plumbing material that they used probably in I want to say like 60s, 70s, and it's deteriorating. So if there's Orangeburg, you have to replace it. There's no other option. It's literally just crackling. So if you're looking at homes in Tempe, Sun City, those were built with Orangeburg. So you definitely want to do a sewer line inspection. Some parts of Scottsdale, the older parts, Phoenix, things like that. And again, it's just arming yourself with now being able to get plumbing companies out there. We have a couple that we trust, and they actually will take our sewer scope video because they know the video, the quality we put in the sewer line, how many feet is the defect that we're seeing, and so they can quote off our report. And we know they're not upselling because that is definitely common practice. Sometimes, just like service companies, it's like you have to vet them out to know, if you're getting like the true cost or if you're really getting like upsold on an issue. And so we've done that. But so a lot of these can be some bigger defects, like the Orangeburg cast iron, holes and cracks. Like you're gonna need to repair that piping material. Holes and cracks, that doesn't necessarily mean they have to repair the entire line. They can sometimes just repair part of that line. Sometimes bellies, sludge, roots can be done with something called hydrojetting. And so that's just common maintenance and practice. It's just like a big power washer to your line. And so you don't always have to rebuild the entire line. It's just knowing that knowledge and being able to say, okay, I'm gonna hydrojet out every few years just to maintain that line just like a car so that I don't have to have the backup and all that stuff happening. Offset, you're gonna have to repair, things like that. So I think when you're looking at investment, when I'm looking at these additional services, we see even issues on the new build inspections right now. So we're really recommending sewer line inspections on new builds. People don't realize because they're getting new homes, get an inspection on new builds. Maybe you're buying it as an investment opportunity. Please also have an inspection, just because it's up to the builder to correct things. And again, it's just making sure you have the knowledge, power to make those important decisions so you're not going into a money pit, which will then offset into your financial goals of, earning money on that property.
And renovated homes.
Because
you don't know who poured what down the drain.
Yeah, no, we had a sewer scope where somebody poured grout down the drain.
Yeah.
Grout's gonna harden. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
But you can't control who did the work.
Yeah.
So you have that power. I think that was in terms of the sewer. Does anybody have any questions so far on kind of different types of services? If you do the sewer line inspection with us, the reason we also did it this way is because we're not plumbing companies, so we don't have skin in the game, so we're not quoting you off repairs, and so that's just important. Accessibility, you try to go through the clean outs in the yard. Sometimes they're covered, so we do our best to be able to locate where they are with a locator, or if it's a single story flat roof, we can go on the roof through the roof fence. Last case scenario is like if there's no way for us to access it, and the seller's willing to pull a toilet, we can do that. We've had a couple times that's happened, but it's also not our home, so if they're willing, we can do that. And so that's it. I think that's probably key on the different types and where things are more costly. Back to mold, if you get spuds, there's been a prior leak, things like that. It's hard for us to say, if something, especially in Arizona, it's dry, we'll take a moisture meter to it and it doesn't rain that much. So we can't tell you if it's active. Maybe the sellers can show you receipt of repairs and proof that they've done different things to repair it. But otherwise, it's do your own due diligence and just make sure that it was properly repaired. There's no evidence of mold and things like that. So that's where I would just be cognizant. I just put this in here because I think it's just interesting, especially as you're kind of reading through inspection reports. Can be a little sometimes overwhelming depending on your experience with buying and purchasing homes. And I have some of this too in flyers if anybody wants it. But we have these as our top 10 common inspection findings because honestly 9 times out of 10 you're going to see this on a report. And most of the time they're pretty minor. They're not that costly. Missing anti-tip bracket is that little piece on your oven. Usually if it's a remodel, it's in the drawer. And you just put it on so that child safety, a child pulls on it, oven doesn't fall over. Not expensive. GFCI issues, again, inflation So it's maybe like, a little bit more expensive to go to Home Depot, but just to replace your GFCI outlets, that's pretty common. The missing dishwasher sanitary high loop is really common. It basically is a way that dirty water doesn't get back into the dishwasher, but like you may see that a lot. It's not that expensive to repair. Flex piping on the TPR discharge pipe is it's just like a safety manual it's a safety feature. Dripping or leaking faucets is more maintenance, so it's just like common maintenance items that you're gonna see, but shouldn't be too crazy unless there's more under the sink or more things that you see. That's different follow-up. Missing anti-siphon, again, that's maybe $10 now at Home Depot, but it basically just, if you're gonna keep your hose hooked up to it, it just prevents hose water from going to your drinking water, is really what it is. Mine's leaking, so we just took off the anti-siphon.
And that's why most people take it off.
Cracked or broken roof tiles. If you have roof issues, like roof is a big ticket item. So if we put in the report, follow up with a roofing specialist. You want to know, what you're looking at for repairs. But those are pretty, broken roof tiles are pretty common. It becomes an issue if like the underlayment's exposed, or you have a lot of like buildup and debris that could cause like flashing issue or different things like that could become more of an issue. Missing or damaged stucco, like it's just things to be aware of. Just it's not too much to repair, but that could be like water or pest intrusion if you do have a lot of that. The non-fire rated pull downstairs is more of just like a safety thing that we have to put in the report for attic access, like in the garage. If they're not fire rated and a garage happens in the fire, it's supposed to like contain the fire for you. And if they're non-fire rated, it's gonna go up back into your home quicker, essentially. So it's a safety thing, but shouldn't be too hard to be able to fire rate those pull downstairs, really. And then AC condensate leaks. This is one that is very common, but just because it's common doesn't mean we shouldn't follow up and make sure that the leak is not active and that they've had the unit serviced. Basically now you could see AC condensate, although we haven't really had much of a monsoon season here, which is crazy. But they occur now during monsoon season. So when the humidity is high, your condensate can leak, and basically over time, if you have like your debris pan and you don't address it, and maybe your AC is in the attic or something, it could overflow, and then you're causing bigger issues. And so like we had a situation, I don't know, I just tell stories because sometimes it puts it into play, but you feel bad. The client called, I think we did the inspection in January, so it's dry. Nothing's happening. We called out condensate leak in the report, and now it's monsoon season, and they have like water coming. It was coming into the garage, but it was going into like where the house goes. So now they have moisture issues, and it was coming from the condensate leak because they didn't follow up and find out if the leak had been repaired or not. And it was not repaired, and so now you just have it dripping, and now you have mold, and now you have all these other issues that come into play. And also at that time, like just like you vet your agents, like not all agents are educated on different pieces, and they say, oh, that's common, don't worry about it. Mm-hmm. So they didn't do anything about it. So this is just knowledge to know that sometimes they're very common, but like make sure you just follow up on some of these bigger things that could cause more issue down the road, and just being aware. So I think it's windows, HVAC, roof, sewer line. Those are all big ticket items that you need to just have your people out. Pool. What else?
Those are the main ones. Those are the big ticket items.
Those
Water heaters sometimes, depending on the issue.
True. And that depends too if you're going to get a home warranty or not on your house. I mean, that's a whole other conversation, whatever you decide to do. But they'll want to know if you followed up on some of these issues. Any questions so far? Perfect. So I think that just, again, tips for as a buyer or if you're selling your home, whatever the case is, just like I mentioned, we evaluate for conditions for that day and time. Things can change prior to moving in. Just be aware of your scope and limitations. Not necessarily for investment, but sometimes depending on your negotiation, like it's not always a to-do list for the seller. So you really just want to make sure you're looking at those big ticket items because that's going to help you in that negotiation process. But that's when a stellar agent and team can kind of help you work through that process. And also we're a critical piece of the transaction. Like you need to know what you're buying. Seller should have home accessible, provide access, all those pieces of it. And just like I said before, we can reduce risk, but we can't mitigate. So, have your people and all the things.
Thank you.
I hope that was helpful.
Yes, very much.
So thank you guys for having me too. And any questions, like if you're ever not sure, like at least I can say with my company, call us. Like we're here to be a resource for you guys. Like if you get a quote after the inspection, and it seems really high, we just did this for somebody who called. They had like, we called out roofing issues and they had like 3 different quotes, buyers and sellers. And the sellers, they were communicating, they wanted to fix it, but they were all, the roof, it was all over the place. Like all over. And so they were like, you know, buyer wants this, seller, like, they're like, who do we believe? And so we're like, all right, well, I have a different company. Let me see if they'll go out and at least just provide you from us where it's nobody out, like another quote. And so they're able to kind of base that information. So like, use your people as a resource. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was fun.
Alright, well, thank you. So, sorry, we
Is
ran.
that it?
That's it. So we ran a little bit long. I'm sorry. Thank you guys for coming. If you have any additional questions, feel free to hang out. We can chat about those. If you scan the QR code, it'll just ask for some information that lets us know you want the spreadsheet to look at what your ROI is, and you want the slides, and any other information that you may want from us. So feel free to do that, and we will get all that over to you. Thank you again, and thank you to AJF, Jeff Smith, Tiger Home Loans, and Jen with Fidelity. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you.